Hi, this is Carrie Brownstein.
This is DJ Premier.
This is Darren Aronofsky.
You got the RZA right here.
Rose McGowan.
Radiohead.
Aisha Tyler.
Tribe Called Quest. Fred Armisen.
Prince Paul.
Javier Munoz. Seth Meyers.
Frankie Cosmos.
Flying Lotus.
Hi, we're Chaim, and you're listening to the Talkhouse Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Talkhouse Podcast. I'm Josh Modell. On this week's episode, we've got the return of one of our favorite repeat guests in conversation with an equally fantastic songwriter making her first Talkhouse Podcast appearance. Now, Sharon Van Etten is a singer and songwriter who's been making records for the past decade plus, growing and changing and taking chances in exactly the way you hope truly talented people will. Her amazing early records were quietly intense, very confessional affairs, but she burst from the seams with subsequent releases. In 2019, she released Remind Me Tomorrow, which brought in bigger sounds and colors and an entirely different kind of confidence to her songwriting and performance. In 2022, Van Etten released another incredible album called We've Been Going About This All Wrong, which puts into intense songs some of the feelings we've all been feeling through the last few years. As you'll hear in this chat, Van Etten has already written a ton of songs for her next album, and now she's trying to figure out how to get there. The other half of today's chat is Canadian singer-songwriter Charlotte Cornfield. Yes, that's her real last name. You can actually read the story on Talkhouse.com from 2021, where she explained its origins to Amy Millan of the band Stars. Cornfield started releasing music back in 2008, and her fifth album, Could Have Done Anything, was released in May of last year. This conversation was originally meant to be recorded back then, but Cornfield had a baby around that time, which, as some of you surely know, changes your schedule pretty intensely. But motherhood is a big part of this conversation. Van Etten has a 6-year-old, and the two openly talk about the joys and challenges of raising a child. Check out a little bit of Gentle Like the Drugs from Charlotte Cornfield's Could Have Done Anything.
Surprise me when I get home for the first time. I really don't feel alone or anything sad or anything profound. I just feel gentle like the drugs I do when you're not around.
In addition to getting deep about parenting, Van Etten and Cornfield talk about Van Etten's creative in-between space, about the pluses and minuses of New York versus LA versus Toronto, and about how Southerners eat trash, but in a good way. Enjoy.
How are you? Where are you?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, I'm at home in Toronto. Just put my 7-month-old down for a nap. And my mom is here helping me today. Yeah. How about you? Where are you at?
I'm home and just trying to, get in a creative headspace. I'm like in this weird in-between place creatively right now. So right now I'm more passionate about like home and being present and going to basketball games and, just walking the dog and reflecting way more than I got to the past year. I'm like applying to school again, but I have a record written. In the past year or so, my band and I wrote together for the first time. I've never really done that. But after the height of pandemic and learning just how to write long distance with each other and sending them ideas and collaborating in that way, once we were touring and playing the songs live, we were so much closer as friends and musicians that I wanted to see what it would feel like to finally be in a room writing together. And we ended up writing probably 2 albums worth of material. Wow. But so now I'm figuring out what that means for the actual recording of the album and when I want to do that and what my narrative is. But that's not going to happen for a minute. Everyone in my band has other projects, and I also just want to take more time to be intentional about what the next thing is. In the meantime, try to live and research and reflect and just figure out what's happening, not just in my little microcosm, but what's happening in the bigger picture to see where I fit in.
That sounds like exciting. Had you done a lot of kind of like group style writing before?
My friends usually make fun of me because I'm not a jammer. Like, I don't know how to jam. And it usually drives me fucking crazy, you know, where it's like you're sound checking and someone's like doodling in the corner. You're like, what is going? Stop it. And I've had co-writing experiences. This is a little bit different because you're each coming in halfway and you're starting from scratch, but it doesn't have to be you, right? So when you're in a group setting and you're kind of the leader, it's, I don't know, I've veered away from that just because I've always been such a solo. I'm total loner, introvert, like share my feelings until I feel like they're eloquent enough to like share them in a song piece and then say, I have this bass idea or drum idea or whatever. But group dynamic is so intricate. It's like having another family when you have a band, right? So you're like, how do I navigate these different personalities, but also bring out the best in each person and be able to sensitively communicate with each person in a very different ways to bring out the things you know they do well. Totally. While also being vulnerable and singing nonsense just so you can get a guitar part in and get the band version without caring what you're saying exactly. I don't know about you, but my lyrics tend to come later most of the time, and I think more about form and instrumentation and melody, and then usually feelings come from that, and then that leads me to like words and phrases that I build upon and turn it into something else. But I don't know, like, what is your approach normally?
Yeah, I've also always been sort of a lone writer. I've also done a little bit of co-writing and stuff with other people, but I always feel like it turns into a little fight, and I think it's because I'm like a little bit closed-minded about I see it going one way and I'm afraid of it going elsewhere, but I could see it being really freeing to, especially after spending so much time with people and developing a close musical bond, but also like knowing each other really well and having that trust and vulnerability. It's definitely something that I've thought about, and so it's cool to hear that that's how you approached this latest batch.
It's me anxiety even hearing you say it back to me like that. I've had, the writing sessions where it feels like a double date gone wrong, I had a co-write with Nick Lowe, of all people, and wow. I was in such a vulnerable state. Like, I had a crazy fluke, like weird train mishap, and I was an hour late to meet him, and I was probably 8 months pregnant, and I was sweating my ass off meeting him for a coffee, and then I took him to my sweet and very humble studio in like a basement in Dumbo, and he's just well-suited and composed and so gentlemanly. And we ended up just talking most of the time because I wasn't in the zone and I was so embarrassed about my tardiness and my state. But we ended up just talking, and that was really informative for me because he talked about like trying to bring the best out of a situation. We're like, okay, well, we're not writing, but I'm meeting somebody who I admire. So what can I take from this? Mm-hmm. And he started talking about how he tends to write. And he's like, it's like, what's your story? Just think about when you're walking out the door and what do you see? And what are you thinking about? And how are you processing? And I ended up using that method when I first started writing 17, because I was in Dumbo walking around and looking at all these places that I felt like I used to know. And then these words started coming out. And this was like, months later. But it was really informative just to be kind of mindful of like your surroundings. Even in that moment where I was so insecure about all the things that I had done, he took that moment to share with me like his style. And that stuck with me even in like one of the worst creative spaces I had been in personally.
Yeah, that is such a cool anecdote, though. I definitely have social anxiety and stuff sometimes, and I worry about going to certain situations, but there always something comes out of it where I'm like, oh yeah, it was worth it, kind of challenging myself to step out of my comfort zone for a second, because like that kind of a gem that leads to like a incredible song and probably informed other stuff that you did or do. I just had my kid 7 months ago, and I feel like I haven't entered back into writing world yet. I'm just not there yet. It feels like a scary new world, and it's at the same time, it's also changed the way I see things and interact with things, not in this huge monumental way, but suddenly I'm like seeing it through the eyes of like a new person, and all the things that she's seeing that I totally took for granted. I'm like, wow, it is so cool to go on a swing for the first time, and like the wonder at looking at colors and all that stuff.
I still remember a friend of mine was hanging with his kid in a park, and they took their shoes off, and his kid stood up, and then he wouldn't move, and his eyes got really bright, and he's like, what is happening? What is happening? And he's like, oh my God, he's barefoot on the grass for the first time.
Wow.
I mean, like, that makes
incredible.
me cry,
Yeah.
like, every time, because it's like these things we take for granted, right? Mm-hmm. But, I mean, to your headspace and postpartum creativity, I remember just feeling so overwhelmed with, you know, when the first time my partner went to work, and that feeling of, you're going to leave me alone with this baby? Like, I don't feel like I'm prepared to just be left alone right now. And just staring at him, feeling like unequipped. I mean, I was, but I felt in so many ways unprepared. And even now, and I love being a mom, but I also still very, like, I want to go back to school to learn how to be a parent. Can they do that? I mean, it's just not about you anymore. And like every decision, everything, I'm not just reflecting my feelings and who I am and what I do in my work, but now everything I do is like, I'm representing my family, and I'm affecting my kid, and every decision has to be made as a whole. And it's not just like my needs anymore. I know those are very basic, and I just constantly am like, I want to simplify my life. I mean, have you thought about touring with a child?
I've done a little bit of it now. I started doing festivals and stuff when she was 10 weeks, and my partner thankfully was able to come along, and it's been a wild adventure. But nothing like 2 weeks or whatever, or like a week in a row. But like the most has been 3 nights in a row, and that was a couple of weeks ago, and I still don't know how I did that. Like, it felt like just sound checking, running back, putting her to bed, running back, doing the gig, running back, checking in. Like, it just brings up these huge questions. But I do have these moments where I'm like, oh, it's so beautiful that she is able to be here and be part of this experience, or that she's like walking around New York with me because we're in New York today, or whatever. But it's, in terms of touring, the big picture of touring, I still haven't figured it out. And I'm still at that stage where every week is a new phase. And I'm like, you're really good in the car right now, but you might hate being in a car next week.
My partner has coached me in this as we're figuring out as we go still. I mean, he's 6 now, and which is crazy to say that. 6 now. But kids are very resilient, but also they adjust. It's who we are. It's our lifestyle. I don't want him to be a road dog by any means. Personally, that's not the life I want for him. I want him to be a kid. I want him to be around kids. He's an only child, so I feel like he's learned just by default to be really good around adults. Sometimes he's bored by kids. He's like, they're just like, they're just playing with Legos over here. I want to watch a Tim Burton movie. Like, he wants to watch Jerry Seinfeld, has a really funny sense of humor. He's like he's a skater, surfer, drummer, super into music, but I love that he doesn't like idolize, like me as like an artist, like that's what he wants to be. It's not at all. He more thinks of my band as like aunts and uncles, and my guitar tech is like one of his favorite people. This is his family, especially when my family was on the East Coast and we were settling into California, and he was 2, 3.
Yeah.
You know, he was just surrounded by adults that wanted to be his teachers.
It's such a special experience.
But he loves tour, you know, but he'll be like, well, I can do camp instead of going on the road with you. I'm like, yeah. He's like, okay, well then I'll do that. Or, you know, or you can hang out with the cousins instead of go to this festival where you'll probably see me for 2 hours.
Yeah.
I'm learning that he doesn't like crowds either, but it's, you know, they're everything that we are. So,
yeah.
And everything we expose them to give them a choice of whether or not it's something that they want to do or be a part of. And I hope we're giving him that voice as he is older and able to express himself. As a mom, I feel like I'm very vulnerable. I don't want to be neglectful. I don't want to be hands off, but I don't want to be a hover mother. But then also you need to be present for the band, but you want to be present for the kid. You don't want to change the dynamic of a band. But my life has completely changed. So
yeah, but it sounds like you have like such a cool balance and a sweet crew. Yeah, and I feel like I'm just kind of adjusting to that too in my small contained road crew. Everyone has been of like 3 or 4, but everyone's been really cool and understanding, which I feel grateful for because. Like, I don't know why I worried this, but I was like, are they just going to be like, oh, she has a kid now? And so that's like this total other universe that we don't know but it's felt like we're kind of doing it together, which is nice.
Do any of your bandmates have kids?
I'm the first of my sort of like core crew of people who I play with, but definitely everyone is surrounded by kids. And everyone's been super supportive. Like I've chatted with a few other kind of moms, parents who tour, like Amy Milland from Stars and Anais Mitchell and stuff, who have expressed that it's challenging, but also can be really fun. And sometimes it's just your life. Like I was at Nelsonville Fest this summer and bumped into Lido Pimienta, who's an amazing Colombian Canadian artist. And she tours with her partner. Her partner is her bandmate. And she's like raising 2 older kids who are in their teens. And then she has a 6-year-old who is with her. And they just like bring her and they put her behind the drum kit while they're playing and just give her toys. And because like that's how they can manage it. And she just always rolls with them. And I was just like, yeah, it's so cool. Like kids are so adaptable in these situations.
So wild. Our kid we did this festival in New Mexico, and Devendra was playing, and my son was super into this recorder. And right before the show, Devendra was like, you must come on stage and do a solo. And he's like, no. And the whole time he's watching side stage, and he crept closer and closer. And I saw Devendra turn around, and he was like, yes, come on out. And my son walked out on stage, and Devendra totally like chilled the band down so that he could take a solo. And like he like That's shredded so on the recorder during the festival. Like whatever, you just kind of let yourself be in the moment. Like everybody rises to the occasion, and like every other band that I've been meeting as I kind of let my guard down and my vulnerability with this new role. Everyone just kind of extends their hands and they want to help, and they're really supportive. And I feel like when I started touring again as a new mom, like I just felt like I was in everybody's way. And then I just felt like if someone else is making me feel that way, that's their problem, not mine.
Yeah.
So just try to surround myself with people that either want to understand it or they already do, and they're just encouraging. But I don't know, still figuring it out.
I'm sure it's just this process of figuring it out for 18 years and be.
I know, forever. I know my parents still say to this day, it never ends, just to warn you. But you said that your mom is helping you right now?
Yeah, my partner works full time, so he's kind of, what you were describing, like he's went back to work full time when my daughter was a month old. And my mom lives about an hour and a half away, but she'll come usually once a week and stay over and be with us for a couple of days, which has been so awesome because she's developing this awesome relationship with the baby. And yeah, and I can sort of like stay tapped into other things because it can be so consuming at times, and in a really fun way.
I remember I think they're illegal now because I was going to try to send one to another working mama, but there are these swings, these bouncer things that hang in doorways. I don't know if you've seen these.
Oh, is it like Jolly Jumper?
Yes.
Style?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is why our kid is so active now, but if I was cooking or something, but I wanted to be around him, but I want to have to keep him from radiators and stuff or the oven as I was cooking. I'd put him right in the hallway between the living, dining, and the kitchen when I was living in New York. And he would just bounce and bounce like for like hours. He thought it was the most fun thing in the world. And I was like, his thighs are like ripped right now. But, I still felt like I was kind of hanging out with him while also getting things done. My friend Sonia gave me one of those like Moses, what do they call it? Like your bedside kind of basket. Because I had like a pretty intense C-section after like 34 hours of induced labor. And so like getting out of bed was really hard. So I would just be able to turn on my side and like check in on him. And then I finally got to the point where I could carry the basket to the bathroom with me if I wanted to take a shower. And I'd put him on the floor of the shower because I didn't want to lose sight of him because I felt guilty at that point to even take a shower, like to leave the room to shower in case he would start crying or something. And I was just like, he probably wanted alone time too, right? Maybe he was like, stop bringing me everywhere. I was like, every moment like that you're just like, you think that you have it figured out or you think that you're a pretty chill parent and then one thing just pops up. You're like, oh, I guess I'm not.
Yeah.
I mean, our kid so far is a pretty adventurous eater. And I don't know if it's from living in other cities and stuff, but like he's the one at the table, like he's the one like when my family comes and visits and they're like, do you want macaroni and cheese? Do you want chicken nuggets? And he'll just be like, I want sushi. And he'll call it, he says sushi.
That's really cute.
I was like, wow, a 6-year-old that eats sushi. I swear we're not snobby eaters, but it's really fun to see him like have an opinion about that kind of thing. Can you imagine, you have a daughter, you said, right?
Yeah.
Can you imagine her, like, ordering at a restaurant? There's going to be a day.
It's wild to think about. Like, it's not that far in the future. And, and I can already see that sort of desire to communicate. And she's going to be really telling us what she wants soon. But yeah, picturing her ordering sushi is really fun to think about.
Well, what is Toronto like right now? I always love Toronto when I'm there, and I have a handful of like favorite musicians I won't spout off right now, but what is the music scene like there now? But also, like, do you feel like there's, like, for a community as well as just what's happening there? And how, I don't want to say post-pandemic, because that's not true, but you know what I mean? Like, what is it like now, and what are you inspired by? And now that you're kind of, not that you're coming out of this motherhood phase, because that's not what it is, but you're coming at the haze of having a newborn.
The community here is really special and focused on kind of creativity and supporting each other. And whether it's like a cool mix of people who are just doing really experimental stuff and playing at this. There's a spot called the Transac that's been there forever where really incredible musicians just go and play. There's a little kind of almost living room vibe type of spot there. And you'll get like Tim from the weather station and Charles Spearin from Broken Social Scene and people like that just dropping in to play and check out what's going on. And I just really feel like there's a lot of seeking and supporting and deep friendships. And I think it's sort of, especially as post-pandemic and in this big city where there's a huge affordability crisis happening, like seeing people figure out ways to stick it out and support one another in the music community has been really cool. The city just hasn't done a great job of making it livable for artists or anyone below like a very high income zone. So it does feel like I feel like, oh, like we have to hang on to these things that we do have and keep them going. I sort of like by chance connected with the guys from Broken Social Scene, and they were like incredibly generous and helpful to me and really sort of lifted me up at a time where I felt like I wasn't sure. I had just taken such a confidence hit from slugging it out for a while and being through some life stuff, and they really were like, we believe in you and what you're doing. And that happened at a time where I just like really needed it, and I'm so grateful for that. And I hadn't found that kind of real sort of uplift community elsewhere. There's like a lot of history here. It's kind of like Chicago in that it's kind of like spread out in a lot of different neighborhoods and residential areas. And it's a little hard to navigate if you haven't spent a lot of time here. So that can sometimes be a barrier too, because there's a lot of great stuff happening in the far East End. But for those of us who live in the West End, it's like impossible to get there. And it's like we can't get to one another or whatever.
How far is like one end to another?
I'm not sure what it would be sort of like in actual distance, but it seems like it takes, no matter how you do it, driving, transit, biking, it takes an hour to get from one end to the other, which is not, it's not like New York.
Yeah. I mean, going from New York to LA was just an eye-opener because like New York is so close, it's just very dense. And because of public transportation, you can get anywhere very easily. You know, once I learned to navigate the subway, like my mind was blown, and I miss it very much. But in LA, it's like it's only on like a grid. So like if you don't live off of this, you're dependent on buses, which are ridiculous because the traffic sucks so bad that even when you do a bus, it's like 2 hours to get from one end to another in like any average traffic situation. People kind of stay to their local pockets for the most part. So they're like, if you want to move to LA area, just like love a neighborhood, have some friends in that pocket, and then you'll figure it out from there. But then it's like it helps you also pick and choose the things that you decide are important to you. Or like even Saturday morning going to the beach, like 30 minutes there, 2 hours back. Yeah. That's just what it's going to be. And so line up a really good podcast and like have your playlist ready and have some shit to talk about. Call some people. That's what everyone's always on, like, in the car when you talk to them if you have friends in California. It's because they're in their cars all the time. And that's when they catch up on life. And then, they're just on their way to work or something.
Yeah, LA, I've been there so many times now, and I've always stayed in a different area. And I never know how to get, like, in my head, I can't really visualize it. Like, I was in Glendale this time, and I was in like Silver Lake that time, and I'm just piecing it together.
Yeah.
And then the last time I was there, I was in Highland Park, and I was like, this is a great area.
Yeah, I mean, they're all kind of like on that east side of town, which is still my favorite as far as like community feeling neighborhoods, and also just where my bandmates are, or half are in New York, or Jersey City, New York, or Jersey City, Brooklyn, and then the other half is LA. But I that's just kind of where, when we first started visiting LA, we fell in love with Glassell Park, and you're feeling like you're in the hills, and it's just, there's a lot of nature, but you can, it's like, after living in New York, we wanted to be able to walk to one place. Yeah. I was like, I just want to be able to go somewhere if I have to, like,
yeah.
So we could walk to get coffee. And that was everything, I'm sure they're burnt out on us by now, but it was nice to have that one place. But yeah, but it's also just, it's growing so fast too. I just feel like when you live in a city, you just have to allow things to change and like keep morphing. That's why people are driven to wanting to live in a metropolitan area and be surrounded by people and culture. At the same time, it grows at this rate that sometimes is uncomfortable.
Yeah, for sure. And I've seen, like, because I grew up in Toronto, pretty downtown, and I lived in Montreal for 6 years and then moved to Brooklyn for a couple of years and then came back. And it's been interesting, like, how my relationship to the city has shifted from having a very firm idea of what it was from, like, when I was a teenager, from growing up here, to, like, moving into this, trying to fight the kind of resistance and the kind of holding on to how the way things were, and trying to be open to all these new things that are happening, or just parts of the city that I didn't even know about. Like, my partner is Portuguese, Torontonian, and kind of grew up partly in Little Portugal and partly in the burbs, but he's introduced me to these little pockets of the city that I had never really spent time in, that are full of really incredible stuff.
Having a kid, does that change, like, your view on living in a city, or what that means for having a family, and, like, for space and safety and, all the obvious paranoid parent feelings? Like, because I feel like we struggled a little bit with, do we want to live in a metropolitan area, or do we want to shelter him from that so that it's something that he wants to go out and do later? Or, like, because if we raise him in a city, well, he'll never want to leave, or, I'm like, I want him to be exposed to culture, like museums and shows and parks and stuff. But at the same time, I'm like, do we simplify so that he wants to seek out more later? I don't know.
That's an interesting thought. I hadn't even thought about that. I think for my partner and I, because we both grew up here, it feels kind of like second nature to, like, raise a kid here, because it's sort of what we know well. And I really like the idea of her, just being able to access community easily and walk to things, and, like, walk to school, but also, like, walk to a show or take the streetcar, which was a big part of my life growing up. And and I think Toronto, because it's not like New York with the density, or even LA, which has, like, let's face it, New York and LA just have way more going on than Toronto. Like, Toronto has stuff going on, but it is more chill as a city. So it feels like the sort of right balance. Like, we can go take her downtown and go to the art gallery, but also kind of just stay in our neighborhood orbit. My parents were really into taking us to the art gallery and taking us to concerts. My dad's a symphony musician and classical producer guy. And so I'm not in the classical world by any means, but I'm excited about just kind of being able to expose her to different things and see what she latches on to, kind of like what you were talking about, like taking your son to the museum and stuff like that. And just the different kinds of fun city events that happen here, like the Caribbean Carnival and different street festivals and fun outdoor music events. And I don't know, I think when I think back on my childhood here, it was like the mix of everything. Are there, like, places or things that you have, like, done with your son that you did as a kid, or that you're, like, excited to do with him?
Well, like, I guess living in LA is a little different than growing up in Jersey, because I grew up in Jersey in kind of a, New York was the beacon. And my mom would always take me into the city, and we'd go to Broadway musicals and go to, like, a nice dinner, and then we'd stay at like a hotel, which we never did because I'm one of 5 kids, so like we always camped. But whenever like a parent would choose one kid to do something like that, it was always a big deal to stay in a hotel. And then we just go to a museum because I was the one kid that could handle going to an art museum, and just like very moved by paintings. And so it's like he definitely enjoys going to museums. And like I think I have a picture of him in front of a Rauschenberg and at LACMA, which is I know it was actually at where were we? No, it wasn't at LACMA, and he was like 2, and like we're like holding him up to show like the scale of the painting kind of thing. But I mean, I remember a lot of parks growing up, and so we make sure just to let him wander. And Griffith Park has this amazing, because it's so vast compared to what I had in New York. I mean, there was Central Park and Prospect Park, but Griffith is just, there's so much more to it. I mean, like mountains and trees and like so many hiking trails. And, there was this famous mountain lion that lived in Griffith Park. But there's this one, it was like a forest camp where it was like a group of 8 kids led by these like 2 awesome hippie ladies that just like let them wander. And, a kid would get stung by a bee, and then they'd watch like a hawk kill a mouse that they had just saved from a gutter. And they were like talking about the circle of life. And when I asked my kid like what he did, and he just said he basically just sat in a tree or climbed all day. He's like, I don't know, I just kind of walked around and I climbed trees and talked about leaves, and he's just covered in mud. After like having school hours and being told what to do, to be able to wander freely, having that space, especially as a city kid, I don't think is allowed. Like our parents allow it, and not on purpose. It's just, oh yeah, I got to sign them up for this and this and this. And you're on like this crazy schedule because you want to keep them busy and active, but also like they need independence and freedom and the permission to wander. And I think that is, it's a different world than when I was a kid. I think we need that as adults too.
Yeah.
I just want to get lost for like 3 hours in a park without a phone, and just allowing your mind to wander and like in nature. I just don't get to do that enough, for sure.
Totally same. Yeah, it is kind of special. It reminds me that there's this park near my place where there's like a really cool group of parents / park volunteers who do a lot of cool stuff there for the kids, but there's a lot of running wild that happens, and there's this big sand pit that has like running water and mud, and it stretches on, and it's kind of got all this topography and just a bunch of shovels. And all summer there's just kids there with shovels like covered in mud, running the water and digging. This is totally wild, but really cute and fun. Aww. And yeah, and that experience, because definitely cities can feel really containing.
Yeah, I'm in my 40s now. It's so strange to say out loud. I more and more just find that I need to be outside, and I want to just put up a chair and sit outside and listen, and it's like a weird recentering. It's like, it's not quite meditation. I don't know how to do that. I think my brain moves it's like too chaotic to like really properly meditate right now in my life. But just to be able to be still enough to not have a phone and to not have the TV on or not try to listen to music, and just force myself to be outside for a minute. Like those moments that I found during the pandemic, the height of it, when I did that, I felt like that recentered me in a way where I could go back to work with this kind of reset. You just like have an hour where you do that every day, which I definitely am not in nature every day like that, but I feel like I need to set more intention to do that.
Same. Yeah.
New Year's. Do you have traditions for the holidays at all?
We're kind of navigating the like first holiday season with our kids. Like, what's it gonna be? Mm-hmm. My dad's Jewish, and So we'll do some like Hanukkah stuff, and then Christmas with various family members. But I think, I'm excited to explore some new holiday traditions. Yeah, what about you?
We do the Christmas thing, Thanksgiving and Christmas. Thanksgiving being my favorite because I just love food and family, and gifts aren't involved. We like decorating the tree, and we have like a family like topper on the tree that we would take turns as kids every year putting on, but since we have one, he gets to put it on every year.
That's fun.
And we have like this, like, we call it holiday trash, where it's basically like Chex Mix. But it's like my partner's family, they're so sweet and Southern, like they have the funniest names for everything, but they call it trash. Be like, did you bring the trash? Give me some of that trash. We need to make more trash. I was like, what are you guys talking about? What's happening right now? I remember the first time he explained it to me that it's trash, but also like all these like new Southern like dishes that I was like, what is the crunch in this like souffle or whatever? They're like, they're cornflakes. And I was like, oh, there's cornflakes in this? That is crazy. You know, it's just like this, like this is so delicious. What's in it? And they'd be basically like butter, and butter with some cheese and cream and salt. My family is up like in the Jersey area, and his family is in the South. It's like we take turns visiting families most year. So, like, we have different traditions depending on where we are.
Right.
It's chaos either way.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, my dad's side of the family is, like, Irish Catholic, so I had, like, 30 cousins, and it was just, like, if someone didn't go to the hospital that Christmas, like, something was wrong. It was just, it was so hectic and fun and wild and chaotic and, you know, just people all the time. And I think as we gain our own traditions from our family's traditions, like I want to be that constant like revolving door of whoever's around can come. We're not like super religious, but we're more just like more about family and just celebrating life and, you know, instilling morals and just finding out how that plays out as we want to teach spirituality to our kid as we get older.
Yeah, I'm curious to go on that journey too. It's exciting.
Well, I'm so excited for you. I mean, everybody says it happens really fast. And I'm like, yeah, I remember, I'm like, yeah. But I look back, I'm like, holy moly. Like, it is, he'll wake up sometimes and he looks like he's grown overnight, or he'll just look like a teenager sometimes, or he'll just give me a look. It's like, no, you can't give me that look yet. You have like 6 more. Yeah, I'm like, please. It happens really fast, and I'm just trying to enjoy it and be as present as possible. And I think it's really important for our kids to like figure out how to do what we love, because I think that's definitely something I want to instill, even when it's hard and even when it's a struggle. And my partner and I, you know, we like our kid has definitely like seen us work through things together, and you know, we're pretty chill people, but we'll have disagreements and we're able to talk them through and openly communicate things, as like even just talk about how he needs to travel and I need to stay home, or like figuring out pick up, drop off, or which piece of our work is more important, and you know, how do we balance it out and like compromise and all that. It's like letting him see that we both love what we do, and you just have to figure out how to do it together, and like just by being able to communicate. And I think that's helping him as he's learning how to communicate himself and figure out what he loves to do.
That's so cool.
And I can't wait to hear what is coming up next for you. I know it's a lot to get back into creative mode, but also just enjoy this moment of coming out of the haze and figuring out where you fall in that mix because it will inform everything you write from now on. People are going to ask how, and you're not going to know how, but like it will, you write from like a deep like place of love, and it's just going to get deeper.
Yeah, definitely excited to explore it for sure.
Thanks for listening to the Talkhouse Podcast, and thanks to Sharon Van Etten and Charlotte Cornfield for chatting. If you liked what you heard, please follow Talkhouse on your favorite podcasting platform and check out all the great stuff at talkhouse.com. This episode was produced by Myron Kaplan, and the Talkhouse theme is composed and performed by The Range. See you next time.